Thibaut.
Hello, thanks for your patience. I'm Thibaut from a place of France you never heard before. I first want to thank the organizer for the rich diversity that we have, even if I'm only a gray-haired 40-something white Caucasian male, but I appreciate their efforts, so I think they deserve applause. So today I want to talk about sustainability in the context of a Ruby project. So I'm an independent consultant, and 5 years ago I started a project called Kiba ETL. I will explain you a bit more, and it's now at V3. And yeah, so that's it pretty much. So you may ask, what is ETL exactly? Because it's a kind of arcane word. So this is a contrived term for extract, transform, and load. This is an old term to describe a form of data pipeline. Typically, you have the type of structure that you see on the right, with a source responsible for extracting the data, and then it flows through the transform that you would create to adapt the data just like you want, and finally reach the destination. And so Kiba, the project that I'm presenting here, is exactly about that, except that Matt's brainwashed me to use Ruby. So I had to use a DSL with a special syntax. And now I want to brainwash you in the way you could write the data pipeline too. So you have a little syntax to describe exactly what you saw on the previous slide, source, transform, and destination. And it's all plain old Ruby object, which you can test separately and use. So sustainability is the fact that you are able to do something on the long run. Maybe you need motivation, maybe you need funding. So there are many different situations. So my first feedback is to avoid thinking in place of the other. Your situation or your current self has special needs, and you need to address that. So your mileage may vary, so follow your own situation to determine what is sustainable. I have 2 kids, I have a family to feed, and I work remotely, so this is taken in balance. And don't compare your insides to other people outsides, especially in open source, because you can see people pouring crazy feature all day long, and you see, oh, I'm just weak, I can't do much, etc. So don't do that. It's a recipe for burnout. To talk about sustainability, I have to go back to a long time ago. My parents offered me that computer with 48 kilobytes of RAM, and I had a lot of time to learn and to explore. It was kind of playground, and it was a time and space to learn. Fast forward 10 years later, the space to learn paid off because I was able to implement that, which is a 3D graphic real-time without a FPU and nothing. So I was able to do more complicated stuff. It was all because I had quality time and support. So funding and support. I must thank my mom and dad because even if my dad casually said, 3D is nice, but does it bring money yet? Okay, ultimately it did. Yeah. So I must thank them. It's all about funding and support. It's a place for innovation that you can build. 10 years later, I was brainwashed and implementing data warehouse with Ruby. Things like business intelligence, moving data around. It was a fresh approach compared to commercial tooling available, if you played with Microsoft tools and everything. I see some people with gray hair nodding. So, yeah. And I stumbled upon a gem called activewarehouse-etl, which was open source, a declarative DSL to declare exactly the type of pipeline that you've seen visually before. It has loads of features to manipulate the data, work with databases and everything. It was great, but a bit less pluggable than the Kiba that I have today. It looked like this. So you can declare a source with a source keyword. You have a special classes that you can invoke with a keyword to declare, oh, this is a CSV file, this is a database, etc. So pretty cool, and you can work with Git to put everything into, to save your history and version your work. It was really the ancestor of what you've seen with Kiba. So it was great, and used it on a number of projects. I was very happy with it. And at some point, the author who is now running DN Simple. If you need DNS configuration, you can go see them. stopped maintenance because he didn't have the need. So I said to myself, oh, this is a shame. We can't let it go to the bin. So I took over the maintenance. And it had a lot of surface, a lot of continuous integration problems, PR, features, emails, a lot of stuff, and a lot of continuous integration. And eventually, what happened is there's an imbalance that was created between what I could get out from the tool, the applicability, the number of cases which I could use it on, and the big support cost caused directly by design, by the number of features and the amazing stuff that you had in there. And for me, again, it's a question of context. If you have a big corporation paying you to do that, maybe it's fine. For me, as an indie developer and consultant, OSS time at that time was lost money. I wasn't paid for that. Culturally, it wasn't very common at that time. So clearly, this meant lost income, and something wasn't right. And I felt like this. I felt the effort required to keep it alive wasn't something worth putting, and nobody was actually picking over. It has a lot of good stuff, but not enough applicability. So I stopped. I just gave up. It was okay, because I have this strict no burnout and no broke policy that I wish you embrace. Okay. So you will see around a lot of people complaining about burnout and the problem of funding and unsustainability around. How many of you have heard of Sonic Pi, the music environment in Ruby? Okay. So how many of you know that the author went through a burnout phase? He mentioned that just today on Twitter. So if you don't have the money or you are just like Mozart, dying alone in a place without money and friends. So, and as well, even if you're altruistic, you can't help people if you're dead or broke. So think about that. So this wasn't right, but I still wanted to use Ruby because I was still brainwashed by maths. So I took a deep thinking, took quite a lot of time to digest, and I took 3 decisions that I should honor before I would go back to OSS again. The first is maybe the hardest, because we all want to have loads of features and connect to every database in the world and everything, but I had to be focused and to reduce the scope. And the first reason is that this reduces everything. If you have a reduced scope, it means less continuous integration problems, less emails, less pull requests, less bug triage. Everything is multiplied down, okay? And it lessens the support cost. So I wanted to have something that I could sustain on the long run without blowing up. So this was the first decision. The second one was, on the other hand, can I have a good multiplier and a good chance to use the project on more situations so that it delivers more value to me, just to me. So an increased applicability, something more generic, and things like avoiding to put too strong expectations on, for instance, having this database or that tooling. And the third one is time boxing. Time boxing is like the idea of constraining the time that you are willing to allow to something, like learning or whatever you practice, so that you are sure you won't blow up. Really, I can advise to use time tracking. Maybe a lot of you already do, but a lot of people don't do that for OSS, for open source software. And that's a big mistake, because if you count the hours after time, and you can realize the balance. And you can have a long-term perspective on the opportunity cost. And with those 3 decisions, and I would say maybe 30 hours of hacking, I was able to have a library, first version, published 5 years ago as LGPL, that I would be able to use on a number of scenarios. I always had the idea, like, how many of you use Sidekick here? Okay. So Sidekick really led the way for me. I thought that I wanted to have a pro version to at least support the features that are too costly to implement in open source, and having something more generous without being a crippled software that would be fully open source. I didn't want to go back after time, like some do, and say to myself, oh, I should monetize this, because we all know that it doesn't work. So I wanted to have something in that, but I had no idea exactly why. And this led me to an internal battle. The devil wanted me to open source everything, because it's the nice thing to do, but at the same time, it's not good for the no broke, no policy rule, which I said before. It's good for a great open source project like Ruby, but as an individual, I cannot afford to go full time and be broke. So, and this is really a constant battle that we will have, and I kept things in my head to decide, oh, will this be in the pro version or open source version, etc. But with that version, I was able to use it on consulting and internal use, which was a big win compared to activewarehouse-etl previously. And this meant that the project was viable for me, even if I only use myself. And actually, other people started using it as well. This helped me discover a large number of patterns and situations where I can use the project on, which would eventually fuel my innovation on the project itself. For instance, I used it to extract data from large enterprise systems and create real-time synchronization with Rails applications, which are more funny to develop, as we all know, because the big CRM and enterprise stuff is really painful to use. And so, yeah, this is one scenario. Another one is aggregation of systems, when you have many vendors which provide some data, and you can grab it through various means like SFTP, email, S3, whatever, and then you transform each of those formats into a common ground, which you can put in your Rails application database and then deliver a great service out of it, like advanced reporting or feature that the original vendor could not imagine. Another scenario is database migration. Like you have a crappy PHP, MySQL application. Yes, we all know that. And a client wants to migrate to Rails, React, and Postgres. How do we do that? We can use Kiba for that purpose. So after a while, I realized that I had checked my 3 boxes. So the support cost for the open source was lower. I could use it in more cases, and I was able to roughly time box my OSS activity. Funding, support, like with my parents somehow, but as a grown-up, it was sustainable again, which is a good thing. The 3 decisions work nicely. But then you wonder how to keep innovating in that schema, in a way. First, you have to have a life. Go sport. Do something else. Go outdoor. Skip the video games. It's not outside life. Okay? Going outside and doing unrelated stuff. I love coding as a hobby, but it's really critical for you to think differently and to be able to do something like coding on a long time, especially on open source. Otherwise, you'll die inside at some point. So don't do that. Another point is to be able to make quality time. You will see often open source maintainers saying, oh, I will work on that this weekend, and I promise the new feature will be there by Monday. Quality time for the project is not this for me. It's maybe the first hour in the morning, I'm clear, and maybe I want to work on the open source. So why should it be a second-class citizen? Maybe it deserves more to be truly innovative. The third one is more for grown-up, and you can see I got some gray hair. It's the intellectual property. Sorry, big word. So at some point, I realized that, say I have a component which I developed on my own use internally, and then I have a consulting mission, a gig, and I want to bring that component to help the clients. And they have an exclusivity clause. Maybe they could decide that it's exclusive to them, but now how can I innovate on the long run? I can't. And so I decided to work with a lawyer to suit up, and I came up with this decision to use non-exclusive rights, which is not commonly used by a lot of people in Europe, but it means that basically you keep the right to use what you wrote, and you provide your client with the ability to use it as well, and to maintain it and to evolve it. I resigned all my consulting contracts, and this way I was able to protect clients between themselves, because a lot of people would just give the same code to people, and then what happens if someone sues the other? It's a problem. And it's a problem for me as an innovator, because it locked my mind to say, oh, I can't give them this code. It would help them, but if I give them, it's finished. So this was the trickiest part of the project. And with this framework in mind, this is my current situation, which means that I'm able to use both the open source and the pro version, which is, I just sold one license, so it's just starting up. But the consulting and the internal needs, like maybe I need to automate my VAT internally as a company, for instance, create reports, and the innovation time I mentioned, allow me to have a long-term perspective, like Matt said for Ruby, but in a different context as a solo developer. And so this means that the situation currently is this one. I've been able to improve the open source version because I'm at V3. Even if it's not a huge project, I have been able to rewrite the whole documentation based on what I learned implementing data pipelines for clients, and to pour more effort in a sister project, which is a Kiba Common, which is a low maintenance for me components that are convenient to use for the user. And finally, start having a pro version, which for now focuses on fast SQL bulk insert and bulk lookup, so you can work on data synchronization that work well rather than working row by row. You can work with batches, and this work well with data migration as well. So this means that I've reached a form of balance, sustainability. Thank you. Question?
Question?
What do you call open source support? Is the maintaining a community, or just answering questions of some people saying you, I want this, and what is what takes you time with open source support?
Open source support is thinking about how to make sure that people won't need me. So I remove myself from the equation as much as possible. For instance, I decided to simple questions should be redirected to Stack Overflow with a special tag, so that if people ask a question and I think it's worth it, I can reply there, and then I can direct people like Doctolib does internally for knowledge-based sharing. So I've automated as a single person this way. But most of my time otherwise is people could ask questions. Sometimes it goes to consulting. So sometimes I offer a bit of my time to just give a bit of answer. If it's more involved, then we go to consulting. Or I can point them to resources. Finally, the biggest brain focus is people willing to asking to put new features when they are actually not needed. So I need to keep the aggressively reduced scope. And sometimes people will ask, oh, I need a registry of component to handle the things that way, etc. And they provide a pull request. And usually you say, OK, you could do that without modifying the core, actually. And this is my main work, saying that you don't need it.
So you mentioned the non-exclusive rights. So does that apply to all the code you write? Do the clients ever get concerned that they lose out, that you might give that to a competitor as well? And you said that it protects some clients from each other. How does that work exactly?
It's what I discovered doing that. It's that it's a balance of demand and services provided. So I've been lucky to be in a position that I could say this is like that, and at the same time you trust me with a lot more than what you expect to happen. So, and at the same time, I can promise that I won't go to a rival because I don't do that. As well, I must, even if the clause applies to all the code, actually the focus is on what could be reusable as Kiba component. So it's kind of well-defined what you could see that way. I mean, it's less dangerous to imagine that a simple ETL connector could be a strategic advantage or not. But some clients will want more guarantees, and I can go to have a custom lawyer extra clauses to say, okay, this is exclusive, but only in that area for that much time. And all the reading I made me realize that as a software developer, we don't know our rights. By default, the very large clients assume that they get to get everything. But it's just because they try. Like, you know the salesman that comes into your door and, okay, it's the same. They are used to that, and they have lawyers, so it's basically non-event for them. But actually, if they really need your service at some point, you can equilibrate the thing. So. But no problem so far. One last question. There.
In terms of percentage of your time, where do you spend? Well, how many percentage of your time do you spend on open sources?
It's a tricky question. No, not tricky because it varies over time. This is why I use time tracking, by the way. And you really should use that if you don't. I work by burst, and sometimes I let the consulting is a great way to discover the patterns, as I said. So this let me extract what is the future version, the actual needs on the field. And this is what takes the most time. After that, if I need to implement, sometimes it will be Ruby 2.7 keywords support, which is coming. Or it will be, OK, I don't want to work this way. I will expand that in upcoming blog post. It can really be in bursts. For instance, before the conference, I prepared version 3, and most of the work was in documentation and deprecation, stuff that usually you wouldn't think a lot about. Okay, so yeah, I worked a lot of hours recently, but on the long run, it's less than 10%, clearly. But again, small scope, large applicability, otherwise it won't work. One last? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.